Welcome to another edition of the Sim Racing Garage. I'm Barry Rowland. In this episode, we'll be doing part 2, or the setup portion, of our review of the Next Level Racing GTTrack Cockpit. In this video, we'll be setting up the cockpit for driving duties by installing a 20 Nm OSW wheel kit, some HPP PRX pedals, and the ProSim sequential shifter light, along with the included harness system. Then taking the cockpit out on the track for hands-on testing. So let's get to it. Now we can talk about installing a wheelbase on the wheel deck of the GTTrack Cockpit. Now, obviously we saw before in the build video that there's a lot of holes drilled in this wheel deck. And usually it's to accommodate the usual suspects, which would be Logitech, Thrustmaster, and Fanatic. And here we can see that I actually mounted my TSPC to this wheel deck using the 6mm holes and screws, obviously, to mount it underneath. And then we went over to the Logitech G29, and it all lined up and bolted up fine. And then last but not least, we had the Fanatic CSL Elite mounted, and all three of those holes fit just fine. So if you have any of those wheelbases, yeah, they're going to work no problem. And they should, especially at this price point on a cockpit. You wouldn't expect anything less, I think. Now, unfortunately, when it comes to direct drive wheels, I haven't found a wheel deck yet, to be honest, that one of these brackets on a Midge or a Cole Morgan or a Lens or even the AccuForce that actually lined up the holes perfect. Usually end up having to drill a hole or file one a little bit to the left or the right or something like that. Well, in this case, when I mounted this Midge, and this is a small Midge, the 20 Nm Midge, and the bracket that we use here, this is the augury system, the OSW system that comes from Augury. They have this beautiful stainless steel bracket that comes with their kit. So we're using that. And I had to put the brackets, the side mount brackets that mount actually to the deck on the outside of the main bracket here that holds the front of the motor. And you can actually mount that on the inside too. But I mounted it on the outside because it lined up with two existing holes back here. So I really got lucky here. They have two holes that actually lined up. But still, these holes were drilled for 6mm bolts. And we use M8 bolts on these direct drive wheels, especially on these Midge wheels and the Cole Morgans and things like that. Because of the torque they can put out, we need a bigger bolt to support that. So what I did was I took a multi-bit that you can see here, and that's just a graduated drill bit that you can widen a hole, an existing hole, very easily. As you can see, I'm doing that. Now after that, we did have to put in two new holes on either side of the front bracket. And that's the usual process of marking the hole like you see here, and then of course finally drilling the hole so that we can get our bolts in. But once that was done, yeah, everything bolted up, no problem. And so now we have our nice Midge motor mounted to the wheel deck. Now speaking of this wheel deck, I'm actually going to pick up on this motor a little bit here, and you might see some flex here a little bit in the deck itself because it's mounted right in the middle. It's 3mm metal. That's how thick this metal is. And they've had, if you watch the build video, you know this is kind of a wrapped around lip down here with some welds over here. So it is reinforced, but there still might be a little bit of wobble in here, but I don't know if that's in the bracket or down here. I'll see it when I finally look at the video. But nothing I think that you would ever notice as far as when you're actually driving the car. But again, we're going to have to drive to see. But the cool thing about this wheelbase, and I said this before in the build video, is if you look at this bracket here where we're mounted this wheel, you'll see that there's a radius slot cut in here. And of course that's to adjust the angle of the motor inside the bracket. But you can see it's a very smooth radius slot. But over here, and it actually shows up better in the build part video, there's actually a series of holes drilled in a radius in here. And the holes mean, when you drill a hole, of course, it leaves that little point lip on it, or a little spike sticking out, so that it won't move if you put a bolt in it. So many of these wheel decks I've reviewed and used over the years that just have the radius slot in there. No matter how, it seemed like no matter how hard you bolt this down or tight you bolt this bolt up that's in that slot, that sooner or later, you're in the heat of battle racing and you're pushing on that wheel to turn, and all of a sudden it slips one way or another. And then all of a sudden, it starts coming loose once it slips. It's very annoying, obviously. But when you have just a series of holes drilled in here, yeah, this is never gonna, I don't care what, maybe if you took a sledgehammer and whacked on it, you could make that bolt break past those little spikes sticking out. But yeah, other than that, I don't think it's ever going to move. And yeah, hats off again to Next Level Racing for doing this. I think all manufacturers should do this all the time. Now, again, I did say before in the build video, there is a drawback. There's no free lunch, as we know, and that is the micro adjustment from a slot that you can do is lost when you actually do drill the holes. But we're talking about 7mm centers on these holes. So you have 7mm moves on the holes. I don't see how that could really matter that much. Now, it might in some applications, but in this application of mounting a wheel, yeah, I don't think so. So yeah, again, I really like that. I think all manufacturers should do that on their holes, unless, of course, or on their slots, unless there's some reason where we're going to have some kind of ability to adjust, like by the millimeter or something. Right. So other than that, yeah, we're ready to go. And this is a very solid feeling wheel deck. Like I said in the build video, the whole unit is very solid, so we'll see, though, when we start putting some pressure on it. Now, what we'll do next is move over to the pedal tray and see what kind of pedals will fit on that. I'm sure that, I've got the Logitechs and the Thrustmasters and things like that, but we'll see what fits on there, and I'm probably going to be mounting my HPP PRXs on that plate, which is going to require a little bit of work and some extra materials, but we'll see that when we get to that segment. Now let's take a look at what we're going to do as far as mounting pedals to our GTTrack Cockpit. Now this is the pedal tray, and you guys probably saw this if you watched the part 1 of this review video, which is the build video. And you can see it has these slots in it. They've cut in it. I guess it was some water jet, probably something like that, or maybe laser. But anyway, it's been spaced, as you might imagine, to handle most of the usual suspects when it comes to pedal sets in the commercial sim racing market. That's like the Fanatics, the Thrustmasters, and the Logitechs. In fact, I actually had those on hand, so I test fit every one of them. And you can see here's a Fanatic shot. And yeah, it's fitting great. The holes in the back of that where you mount it mount up just fine. And then we went to the Thrustmaster, and it has 2 M6 holes mounted in the bottom of its base. And it lined up, I believe, with these here, these slots here. So no problem with that one. And the Logitech actually had the most solid mount of all of them, believe it or not, because it actually has 3 M6 holes in the top of that base in the bottom and 3 in the bottom. So once we put that on there, yeah, it was nice and secure, and it actually lined up with both of the slots. In other words, it was equal distance between it, so it matched up perfectly. Right. So what about HEs? Husingville pedals. Well, they'll mount on here no problem too, but the only caveat being the spacings for the correct spacing for the new Pro Sprints are actually back here. That's where the 70mm is, or 69.5 centers. But you got to remember the Husingvilles, that they have kind of a long slot in their base where each mounting slot is. So you actually got some pretty good wiggle room back and forth on those for mounting, so it shouldn't have any problem with HE pedals on this. However, what I want to run on this, as far as the review goes, is my beautiful HPP PRX pedals. And they have a 225mm spacing. So let's take a look at that. I got a close-up shot over here. I'm going to go ahead and measure this out. And yeah, here's the center for the first slot back here, right? And I'm going to try to get it so you guys can see this. I know it's a bit of a distance, but you have to trust me here. And I need 225mm. Well, if I go over here, I can see I have 225mm, but I'm about, 30mm short of the next slot. So I'm going to go to the next slot and see if I got some spacing available. And nope, there's 225mm just beyond this slot right here. So we got one left that I can use, or try to use, and we'll put the center there. And yeah, same story, I'm just past that last slot. Now, what about the wiggle room? Well, there is no wiggle room on the HPPs. They just have a hole in them. So you have to pretty much be right on, or it's not going to work. Okay, not that big of a deal, really. I mean, we always enjoy a challenge here at the SRG for getting our stuff mounted. So here's what we ended up with. The magic of aluminum profile. Now this is a 10 series profile, so they're 1 inch by 1 inch, and so that means that these pedals are actually going to sit 2 inches off the deck. But let me show you how I did this at first, but let me show you how I put this together first. I got a close-up over here. Now, first off, obviously we've got, well, let's turn around this way, my heel plate's blocking it. We've got these two pieces here that are running parallel with the actual pedals themselves, and that's the bottom piece. And of course, it's just a matter of taking two other pieces, or two more pieces, and putting them across those, right? Are perpendicular. Now, I use these little L brackets here. They're single spot or single position L brackets. It means one bolt on each side. And I put them on the back and I put them also in the front on both of these pieces of profile. And the reason you do that, it'll actually hold it with one bracket behind it. Yeah, sure it will. But when you're pressing on these pedals and you're putting a lot of pressure maybe on that brake pedal, then this will stop it, the pressure. But this tends to want to, this piece of square profile tends to want to rotate this way and lift up off of the other profile underneath it when you're really putting a lot of pressure on it. So that's why we put another bracket behind it. That'll keep that lifting from happening. And then we'll have a nice solid mount and we get all the tactile feedback we should be getting from this pedal set, and it's not being lost where we get some flex down here because it's bending a little bit when we put a lot of pressure on it. Right. One more thing I wanted to show you real quick is the heel plate on this thing. See the heel plate? Stainless steel piece, a really nice piece actually. But they are, the way this is designed, let me flip this over and show you this real quick. The way this is designed is we have the main brake pedal here, and it has some tapped holes in it that we put 2 bolts in it. And you see that there's 2 bolts in each one of these pieces here, and they're aluminum, billet aluminum. And then we attach these other pieces of billet aluminum, but they only have 1 bolt, and we attach those to those, obviously, right? And these pieces here are the ones that have the tapped holes in it, and they're 1/4 inch by 20 pitch. But here's the deal. When you're actually hammering on in your racing and your foot slips off the pedal maybe and slams into the heel plate or hits the heel plate, because there's only 1 bolt on each side, no matter how tight you have it, it'll move on you. So the heel plate will go from this to this. And you know, you can still race that way, obviously. I mean, it's not a tragedy, but it is kind of, it breaks your concentration a bit when something changes like that. So these other brackets that you've probably already seen and wonder what they were maybe. All right, let me get you both of them in there. Got one here and I got one back here. Now those brackets are actually a single bolt on the bottom and made for 2 bolts on the other side. In other words, they're double the height as they are down here. And they just happen to fit perfectly on the height to where this heel plate is flat. Now that, once I tighten that down obviously and the heel plate sitting on that, no matter how hard our foot slips off this pedal and hits this heel plate, you can see it there. Yeah, you can bang on that all day and it's not going anywhere. So if you guys have some HPPs out there and you're using them, you probably know what I'm talking about. And yeah, so that's the easy cure for it. But of course, you have to be mounting it with some. It doesn't matter which profile, but some aluminum profile. Now, the aluminum profile you use here doesn't really matter. It could be a 40 series or whatever, and that's going to lift the pedals up to a certain height. If I have 40, what is that? I think that's 1.5 inches, I think. And right now I've got 2 10s on here, so they're 1 inch. So I'm actually 2 inches off the deck, the pedal tray over here, which actually works out pretty well in my case with this particular setup. And the reason is, remember, if you saw in the build part, we're using the Next Level Racing V3 motion platform, right? So we got 2-axis roll and pitch on that. But when we mount it to the actual rig over here, as you can see in this picture here, I've got my ruler set up here, that typically or regularly we would just set that seat right on those bottom brackets there where the end of the ruler is actually resting on the bottom there. We would actually drop the seat right down on there and bolt it up and you're done. But because it's sitting on that motion module, it's actually 6 inches or like 155 millimeters or something like that higher, right? So what that means is the seat's higher, that means our butt's higher, which means our legs are going to be dropping down further at a more acute angle to get to our brake pedals. And this chassis does not have a adjustable brake tray, or pedal tray rather, that can go up and down. And not many do, really. I mean, I've always been looking for one that actually did that and had a solid mount. I think there are some P1 rigs out there. If you've got an aluminum profile rig, you could probably set it up. But anyway, this raises the pedals up 2 inches, which knocks 2 inches out of the 6 inches that we came up or went using that module, which helps when you're sitting. It's more comfortable. I can notice right away it's more comfortable having that 2 inches higher because your legs aren't as an acute angle when you're using it. But we'll see that once we have all this mounted up and I'm actually in the cockpit. Right. Anything else we want to talk about here? Nah, that's about it. Except that, man, don't these things look good? There's some pretty pedals. So what we're going to do now is obviously mount this to the plate. Let me just, I guess I should show you that what I'm going to do there. And it's pretty simple. I have these brackets here. See these? And actually, I'm only going to use one of these holes because they don't line up to, I can't use them on two of the slots here. They're just too short, doesn't work. Let me show you over here my close-up. Yeah, see, I got two holes, but it just doesn't match those slots. So I'm just going to use one hole, which should be actually fine as far as keeping it from sliding anywhere I don't want it to. So I'll just mount two of these out here, one here, maybe one over here, something like that. And of course, we've already got these T-nuts on them. And what we'll do is just slide the whole assembly in there. And we'll have two over here, obviously. And then we can lock down the whole assembly on 4 points, two over here and two over here, to keep that from moving at all. And trust me, it won't move. I've already, I've been using this stuff for a long time. So that's going to be the solution to finally getting the pedals themselves mounted to the tray. And now let's go do that. And when we come back, we'll see the results. So here we are, sitting in the cockpit. Now that I have the pedals in position, the seat was already there. Yeah, and the steering wheel's right where I need it to be. Everything feels really, really comfortable. I think I could drive for a long time in this position. Now, you have to remember, though, with this pedal tray, because we're using that profile, the 10 series, that gives me a 2-inch lift off the pedal tray, rather. So if I didn't have that, my legs would actually have more of a bend in it, right about there, yeah, because my heels are down on the plate now. So that's, I typically like to have it higher, or maybe even higher than this. But right here, yeah, this will be fine. I don't think I'll have any issue at all. It's just working out pretty good because of the lift on it. Remember, because we've got this module in here, the seat is sitting higher, so that really helps. Actually, I might even try to go like a 40 series or maybe a 4080 under there or something to get it even higher. So yeah, I typically, but then again, it's one of those things you have to drive, try it, and then see if you like it or not. We're going to have some flex in this wheel deck, I think, when we're using it, but probably not enough that when I'm driving that I'm actually going to notice it. You might be able to see some there. But this is inherent to the design of a tube going inside of a tube. There's only so much, I mean, you're not going to get it rock solid like a P1 wheel mount for one of these kind of wheels with a Midge motor or a Cole Morgan or something like that, because they got that 15 millimeter thick plate in there. That's pretty rock solid. But anyway, yeah, the seat feels comfortable, actually. It's a pretty comfortable seat. I was a little surprised because I like my bucket seat, my Sparco, but this is really, it's got the bolsters in the side here, and of course we're going to feel those more when the seat mover is actually moving the seat. So yeah, this is going to be okay. But you see this, all right, don't be alarmed. This is obviously the seat module's doing that, right? It's not the seat itself, and that's because we don't have it powered on. The brakes are not engaged right now on this module, so just disregard that for now, because once we have power on it, then we'll take a look at it, and then we'll be able to see how much movement it is before it starts moving. But typically, all these seat movers, even with them powered up, they still got a little bit of play in them because of that universal joint that they're pivoting on. So it's really hard to get, all the play out of a universal joint because, well, it needs a little play to be able to move, right? So yeah, I guess that's about it. What we'll do next, obviously, the only thing we have left is getting the shifter set up. I don't know what I'm going to do over there yet, but we'll find out when we come back. Now we can talk about the shifter mounting options, and actually, if you saw the build section or the part 1 section of this review of the GTTrack Cockpit, you would have seen that I went over how all that works. And we're going to talk briefly about the shifters that I used on it. Firstly, I put a Thrustmaster TH8A on it. No problem with the table clamping to that platform or to the actual plate that we're using. And yeah, no big deal there. If you wanted to remove the table clamp and bolt it directly to the plate, you will have to drill at least one extra hole for that M6 bolt that goes through there. It just doesn't have that triangle pattern on this plate. Now, I also mounted the Logitech, which was a bit of a challenge, the G29 shifter, well, the one that came with my G29 wheel, the H pattern. And the problem with that is there's lips on that plate that come down and then bend in. You can see a picture of them here. And the clamps, if you take them all the way up, they hit on the bottom of those lips. As you can see here, there's a gap there that won't close. So I ended up putting a block of wood in there, and this is just a scrap block that I had laying around, and it worked fine after I did that. Just space it down so the clamps could actually grab that piece of wood and push it up into the bottom of the plate. Easy enough. But if I was going to use this Logitech shifter on this cockpit all the time, obviously I would cut a better piece of wood with something a little wider and then cut up the end off and maybe paint it black or something. But with a shim in there, basically, is what we're doing, is shimming it out, then yeah, it works fine. Now, the Fanatic shifter, I don't have one of those, but it does have holes on this plate, and the centers are 90 millimeters on the width and 70 millimeters on the length from front to back rather of that shifter. And yeah, that has a great hole set up for it, and so you won't have any problem mounting that Fanatic shifter, the 1.5 sequential / 8 pattern or H pattern shifter. Now, when it comes to other shifters, though, they've actually included an accessory plate for that shifter plate, which is very nice. And if you saw the build video or the part 1 of this review of the GTTrack Cockpit that I'm doing, then you would know how this works. This sits right on top of the plate, and then we secure it with these little set screws underneath, and we can tighten down on those. So it gives us a nice flat surface. Now, first off, I have the ProSim Lite shifter over here, and I'm going to get a close-up of that. And you can see that it actually, now remember, we got some slots here, so we got a little bit of wiggle room here back and forth. And if I put this on here, square on top of it, then yeah, I have room to get bolts into here, right? Oops, sliding around a little. So this is not going to be a problem mounting this. The only issue is, really, if you think about it, is this is pretty heavy, and I'm not sure how it's going to perform. We're going to find out, but I'm not sure exactly how it's going to perform on that arm that we're using for the mount. So we'll get to that point once we have this mounted. Now, we also can build up on this platform, but again, there might be a weight issue here, and I'm going to pull out some profile just to show you what I'm talking about. I'm not really going to mount it, and I'll do the close-up here. We can mount a couple of pieces of profile this way and then mount something to it, and because we've got these slots in it, we can actually move these profiles back and forth to get the width we need from whatever we're actually going to be mounting here. Now we can also take, if the width is too much, or the length, or there's something is blocking by the width here, and I'm going to demonstrate that in a second. With this is my plate that I use for my rally driving. Okay, it's already set up, it's drilled out. It's a little 1/8 inch aluminum plate that I fabricated, and we've got a ProSim Lite up here. This is the version 2. And then we have the Husingveld, the great Husingveld handbrake mounted here. And on my P1 rig, I just have an easy mount to do on that with 240 series pieces of profile. But with this one, because of the way, I guess I should turn this around so you can see that, this plate is mounted. And this is typical. Get you close up here. And this is typical when I make a mount for one thing and you're trying to take it over to something else. It doesn't quite work. And you can see that the screws that are holding the little T-nuts under here that are holding this part of the flange of the shifter down are interfering with this profile, which is really not a problem because it's profile. And what I would do is, of course I'm not going to do this because this is probably way too heavy. This is going to be way too heavy for that one little arm over there. But what I would do is simply just take it and do this. Put a couple more pieces of profile in there and space them out however I needed, and then we could set this on top, and the screws would actually clear, and then it would sit flush again, like that. There we go. Again, that's the great thing about 80/20 profile. It just does a great job with any mods you might need. Of course, this whole assembly is going to be pretty heavy, so yeah, I won't be mounting this to that one little arm over there that's on this cockpit, but it just gives you a general idea of what you can do if you need to. Right, so enough of that. What we'll do now is go ahead and make a lot of noise with this profile. We'll go ahead and mount this accessory plate, and then I'm more than likely obviously going to end up with this ProSim Lite shifter on there and see how that works. Right, we have the ProSim sequential mounted, and you can see we've got 2 bolts on each side, and I actually slid it over to the left side as far as I could to get it closer to the seat bolster over here. And obviously we're using the accessory plate, and we'll go underneath here and look at how that worked. And you can see there's the 4 bolts that are holding the accessory plate on, and then we have the bolts the cap head bolts that were actually in between here. Oh, well, that's showing up. I think the front one's showing up better because of the space behind it. But anyway, we really didn't need the spacing that the nuts provide. You can see we have about a 1/4 inch or so of space there because of the nuts that are holding those set screws. And if you can go back to the build section to see how that works. But you can see it's actually overhanging the primary mount on both sides. So we really didn't need the space, but yeah, it's good to have it there. If I had to put those bolts closer in when I mounted the shifter, then they would still clear the primary mounting surface. So yes, it looks like it's going to work fine. Okay, so what we'll do next is obviously get everything plugged in, because we're done with mounting everything that we're going to mount on this for testing. So we'll go ahead and spin it around and plug everything in, and let's take this for a drive and see what we think. Let's talk about the driving experience using the GTTrack Cockpit kit, and we might as well make the final thoughts part of it also. First off, I think this is a very stiff cockpit, especially considering it's a prefab tube type of cockpit. And the reasons for this are the heavier gauge steel used at the mounting points and the tube design that gives it support where it needs it most. And we have plenty of nice steel bolts to bolt everything together. Also, the fact that they use a series of drilled holes in a radius pattern instead of the radius slots seen on most of these type of cockpits makes the possibility of the angle of adjustment on the wheel deck or the pedal tray slipping during use, I think, pretty much a thing of the past. Now, I decided to drive the cockpit with and without the casters installed, and having the casters locked and not having them locked or unlocked. As expected, in both cases, we did have some movement in it. Of course, more so with them unlocked. There is some flex in the wheel deck that can be observed from the side profile video shots, but it is minimal and not really that noticeable when driving unless you're really looking for it. The pedal tray also did a great job keeping the flex to a minimum, but the front locking bolts are a must to make that happen. Now, using the V3 motion platform with this cockpit was a lot of fun, as you might imagine, but it does raise the seating position from the non-motion height an additional 6 inches. So you'll have to find a way to raise the pedals in the cockpit to get a proper GT styled sitting position. Again, this is not uncommon among most cockpits. The shifter mount on the GTTrack is a good design, I think, and will handle most shifters with no problem. There is some flex in the mount, but again, that's not uncommon with these type of cockpits. And really the flex is not enough to be a deal breaker and is more sturdy than, again, like I said, a lot of the other ones that I've tried at the Sim Racing Garage. And it didn't bother me enough, I think, to earn an official ding. But again, something to be concerned with or to be aware of anyway if you're going to buy this. Right. And the one thing I would like to see changed on this higher end cockpit is the reclining seat. Now, if you guys have been watching my videos, you know I don't like flex in any area of my cockpit, even though I don't think it's really possible to have a cockpit and all of its mounted hardware to have zero flex as a combined unit. But really that doesn't mean we can't try to make this happen, right? In some areas it's easier than others for us to get closer to the no flex goal. And here's the thing of it's really subjective, I guess, at this part or at this point, and some of this is not subjective, it's just fact. And I know why manufacturers use these type of seats in their cockpits. First, there is the comfort features that these seats have, and this seat is no exception. It's a very comfortable seat, and the fact that you can adjust the seat back incline makes finding a good feeling seating position a breeze, and it doesn't take any time at all. You're just right there just by adjusting it. But this is at the cost of flex in the adjusting mechanism itself and in the hinge area of the seat back. And under braking, this to me was very noticeable. And it was also noticeably bothersome. Probably because I was coming from a real fixed back racing seat, and they are very stiff. I had to spend some time to adjust my braking style a bit to get back to near the braking consistency I have with my Sparco seat. And you know, it really is it is what it is here, I guess is what we should say. And this is not directed in singling out GTTrack itself because of this seat. Any seat that has an adjustable seat back will have the same issues with flex, some more than others. Now, to contradict what I just said, and to show just how subjective this is as far as what a person wants in a racing seat, I've had a fellow sim racer over here while I was doing this review who has the same type of adjustable reclining back seat in his cockpit, and he loved this seat. So, you know, your seat that is directly related to your past experience, I think, is going to be how you feel about this seat, or any reclining seat for that matter. So overall, the driving experience is very good with this cockpit. And once I had my Sparco seat mounted, it felt like the premium price cockpit that it is. I'm Barry Rowland. Thanks again for watching the Sim Racing Garage channel. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And if you would like to support what I do here at the SRG, visit my website at simracinggarage.com.